This hangout is live. I can't see you, Carl.
Um, Here we are, live.
Right. Go on landscape.
I got live. I think that's the first time we've had live in the corner.
Awesome. So just hold on for 1 second, buddy. I appreciate your patience and we'll get there.
Okay, so I've learnt something. I've got to have that yellow box in the corner.
Okay. That's cool.
So I got a funny feeling we are worldwide. Live than
Finally now, after I'm just going to delete that horrible video of me ranting and raving because
I'm just trying to figure out, is there a link that you can yeah, I don't know. I don't know nothing.
We just have to work with it. So just hold on, buddy.
Oh, that's encouraging. So that live, because I think I've seen that on TV. That box.
Yay. So Quentin James, thank you, my friend. Very dark though. So I've put on some light here and Carl, you're dark where you are too.
Oh, okay. I'll get us some light going.
Yeah.
I just noticed that this it drains my phone, so I've got to
plug your phone in. Okay.
I got a good feeling about this because we're live now.
we're certainly live. And guys, thank you for your patience before. We had 12 viewers participating in the chat, talking about how important Danny Kerwin was. So if you'd like to share with us, Carl, your thoughts about the passing, the tragic death, I suppose, of Danny Kerwin a couple of days ago.
Well, yeah, he was an enigma. He was an interesting guy that was had more talent in his finger than I'll ever have. His pinky finger, that is. Just a incredible guitar player. Peter Green said that he had a unique vibrato that was unmatched, unheard of before, and like a lot of these guys had a very varied taste in music: ragtime, jazz, 30s big band jazz, the Rolling 40s, all that sort of stuff. He brought a lot to Fleetwood Mac. Obviously, like all of us, the fundamentals of him was a blues lover, but a bit like Brian Jones, he brought different facets to the playing, as evident on Then Play On. Just these guys could channel. It's almost mystical in a way. They could channel so many, almost go through the medieval ages. They could just, Jimmy Page had that same gift. They could just channel previous generations. It's just unbelievable. But yeah, a tragedy in the same sense too. He just never recovered after Peter Green left. Big boots to fill, obviously. Leadership role, him and Jeremy Spencer. And they Kiln House was a good album. I don't know anything about Future Games or Bare Trees, but after that, he was he just got lost into his own world, never to be heard of again.
Yeah, well, look, I agree with you. Fleetwood Mac for me were instrumental in my development, my musical development when I was growing up. I remember listening to Black Magic Woman, the Santana version, and I was at a 21st birthday party. One of my cousins, I would have been about 14 or 15, and I was lucky to be surrounded by a couple of uncles who knew good music, and having a conversation with them when they said to me that it was a cover, and I argued with them saying, no, Santana doesn't cover people. And yeah, got my lesson that way. Well,
it's funny because when the radio plays Black Magic Woman, all the audience, most people not. I mean, we had that funny situation that where we worked. That guy said he's going to see Fleetwood Mac, and I forgot. We just both laughed because he didn't know who Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green was.
Yeah, so, yeah, and that's a given, I suppose, because most people know Fleetwood Mac, the disco version of Fleetwood Mac.
Don't realise that Peter Green was so humble. He named the band after his rhythm section, Mick Fleetwood and John McVie, Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, absolutely. The tightest blues rhythm section in England at the time.
Yep.
Well, certainly, one of the best. I think one of the interesting things about Danny Kirwan for me, and Peter Green, is that these guys didn't have 50 guitar pedals.
Right.
They just had a guitar, a tone knob, and a volume knob, and their amplifier, and made their guitar, do things that I can't do with 5 pedals.
They had a really good touch, and I think we've talked about this before. They start out with Fender amps, and then moved on to they were one of the first bands to get sponsored by Orange amps. I think they put Orange on the map, to be honest.
Them and Black Sabbath.
Yeah, and what's really sad in a way was it's a bit like Jimi Hendrix. It seemed to be just how everything worked, but late 66 to 67, up to about 1970, 3 years, Cream, the Fleetwood Mac, the original Fleetwood Mac, as I'd like to call them, the tail end of Brian Jones, the Jimi Hendrix, all that sort of stuff. It just 1970 was over. It was like, yeah. So those 3 years were just, magical. And one thing I'd like to mention, I was thinking about this during the week, just to get slightly off topic, but we mentioned the lack of good American blues bands. There probably were some good bands, white boy blues bands, but we forgot to mention the Doors. Jim Morrison was a big blues lover.
Yeah.
But back to Danny, just a sweet guy. I've read, sensitive soul, fantastic guitar player, beautiful touch, amazing vibrato, and not to mention a good singer and a good songwriter.
I was watching another channel earlier this morning, and Shane from In the Blues, he's an Australian guy that's got a really popular channel. You may have seen him, Carl. He does a lot of gear reviews. Mm-hmm. Nice guy, very, very, very good guitar player. Anyway, one of the questions asked in the chat from one of his viewers was, why is it that these English guys can play the guitar really, really well back then? And obviously that fits into what we're talking about. And I sort of thought, well, yeah, you've got Keith Richards, you've got Clapton, Peter Green, Jeff Beck, Danny Kirwan, and the list is endless of these English guitar players.
Yeah, I think it's England, I guess, isolated. They didn't have the access to downtown Los Angeles or Detroit Motown or the New York jazz scene, the Chicago blues scene, the band. In America, you could see bands left, right, and center. I think those English guys came from pretty tough working class families. Grey, cloudy days. Their only outlet, the only sunshine, was the blues music from another country coming through the radio. So there was just a definite desire and a passion to be like that, to emulate the sweet sounds they heard. I guess there was more hunger in England as opposed to America. In America, obviously, I've lived there. Everything's at your fingertips. Where in some of the countries like England, New Zealand, Australia, because we're isolated, there's a lot more hunger to do things, I think.
JJ is making a point here in the chat. Unemployment helped. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard the stories. We've read up about, Keith Richards came from, a Dartford working class. Brian Jones came from slightly upper class, working class. Mick Jagger's, dad was a PE teacher. With Tony Iommi, and they're big blues lovers. A tough town of Birmingham, the steel mill, steel factories. Judas Priest, the same. Peter Green's was a butcher, but a butcher trainee. His parent. I think they all lived in a small flat. So
Clapton lifted bricks for a while for his grandfather.
yeah. So you can just imagine, and I'm just imagining because I've never been to England, but just lots of cold, rainy days. Certain things not that accessible. Probably a very limited music scene. Probably a lot of people all at the same age, which was obviously they're all born around mid 1940s, all went to art school. There was probably a lot of bouncing off each other, a lot of you got that record, that lick, or you seen that guy play, and
I think you've said something really interesting because in a lot of the books that I've read, the art school situation in England was instrumental. You look at Jeff Beck, you look at the guitarist from The Who, Eric Clapton, the Beatles, they all went to art school.
Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
So obviously there was some kind of and Ronnie Wood, I think, was the same. They all. I guess there was someone inspiring behind the scenes that said these kids need. They need. They got talent. They need encouraging. But then again, London is a big city, and that's not going to be left behind.
No, you're right, and I take my hat off to these guys because that's certainly the topic of our series, which is the Stones yeah. and slash, i.e. the British blues scene. So so I suppose the homework we gave each other, and because we had some technical issues, I suppose we probably aren't going to have as much of an in-depth discussion maybe he had planned, was to pick a couple of songs from
Blue and
Lonesome.
Yeah.
I did some homework. I listened to the album 3 or 4 times over the week, and in fact, when that album came out, that's all I listened to for about 6 months.
Right.
Yeah, I was, personally blown away by that album. Rolling Stone gave it a 4.5 out of 5. Most of the good reviewers gave it a good mark. I give it a 5 out of 5. Mainly because of Mick's singing. And also the way that he was playing the harp. So the first song that I've picked is I Gotta Go.
Okay.
Which
I'll catch you later then.
Oh, where are you going?
You got to go.
No, where are you? Oh, you got me. You bugger. Thought you were talking to one of your girlfriends. That's the song that's the first song that I've picked. Mainly because of the that harp. It's just phenomenal. And if anybody forgot how good of a harp player Mick Jagger is, just listen to that album and that song.
Yep. Wow. Little Walter, yep.
What's your song?
My song is Just Your Fool. So we're doing a Little Walter again. I just wanted to touch on that particular album's quite interesting because they did a lot of blues covers, but they did a lot of unusual blues covers, stuff that you actually don't hear. Because, I mean, obviously, when people think of blues, they think of Got My Mojo Working, Manish Boy, Hoochie Coochie, My Babe, you know, all the mainstream blues songs. But the Stones did a good job of picking a lot of unknown blues songs from the great artists. So, you know, you don't hear I Gotta Go much. You don't hear A Little Rain by Jimmy Reed. But what I liked about how the Stones picked Little Walter was because Little Walter is the giant among giants because he was the epitome of a blues man. If you read up about him, he started playing, I think, when he was 11. And he was playing down south in Louisiana, where he was from, at the age of 12, 13, sleeping on pool tables and streets and juke joints. And I think he got up to Chicago when he was about 18. But he was Muddy Waters' right-hand man. He invented, not invented, but helped form and create the Chicago blues sound, because the Chicago blues sound would be nothing without the harmonica. When people think of Chicago blues, it's got to have the harp.
Well, certainly with that green bullet microphone and playing through a beat up tweed amp, certainly transforming the harp into that beautiful instrument that it is, into the a voice that shook the ground that you were standing on.
Yep. See, prior to Little Walter, there was two Sonny Boy Williamsons. There was the Sonny Boy Williamson, Rice Miller, that had the big black coat that had about 10 harps in his pockets, a couple of boiled eggs, and a hip flask of whiskey. And then there was the original Sonny Boy Williamson, which was a guy called John Williamson, I think. And then we had other harp players, but they played what was called country harp, which was, like you were saying, no microphone whatsoever, no amps. Little Walter tried to emulate the saxophone. That's what he was trying to do. And he created that thick, velvety tone that was synonymous now with Chicago blues. So can you imagine listening to Last Night through a small radio and hearing that harmonica? It is actually pretty scary. And what Little Walter did, which was quite interesting, was he would play what they call what do they call that? What's that term? Triplets, which you can do on the guitar, where you do 3 notes in a row. And yeah, just scary, spooky, powerful. Wow. Muddy Waters loved him so much that not only was he sad to see him go, because he was on Muddy Waters' most famous cuts, but Muddy Waters had his 1954 bio picture on his mantelpiece in his house. I've got it here. Oh, you see that?
Wow.
That's the promo shot of little Marion Jacobs when he was just a young man, and the world would never be the same. But yeah, Little Walter, and rounding out everything, was a bit like Danny Kerwin, just so much talent. He could do anything. He could play straight blues. He could do jump blues, jive blues. He could do jazz. He could do pop songs. He had the Aces brothers with him, Louie and Dave Myers, but his life was cut short, drunk too much, and dice game, and someone hit his head because someone stole $10 and went home, had a headache, and never woke up. Very sad.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you're certainly a giant, and all credit to the producer, as I understand it, Don was, for helping Mick and Keith and the rest of the band renegotiate some of these songs.
Yep.
That maybe they'd forgotten. So again, you look at Jimmy Miller and Don Moz helping, making sure that these guys weren't doing another cover of Hoochie Coochie Man.
Yeah. We all heard about Who's Honkin' on Bobo, and that was that. They were trying to do the same thing, Aerosmith, but a lot of that album was just laden with your more mainstream blues songs.
Yeah.
Baby, please
I
don't.
I agree with you.
One thing I want to mention too, and I read, I don't have his book. I don't know what happened to it. I had in America. If you ever managed to get the biography of Little Walter, it's a fascinating read. And unfortunately, as the chapters go on, you can see that just how his drinking got heavier and just unfortunately the demise. But he said, this is a quote apparently, his favorite band was the Rolling Stones. That is just that. What a tribute! What a gesture to say that. And the funny thing about when he said that was his favorite band, he wasn't talking about Mick, Keith, or Brian. He was talking about the rhythm section. He said the Rolling Stones could swing, and that is your Billy Wyman and your Charlie Watts. So, yeah.
Have you seen Cadillac Records?
Yes. Yeah.
The movie.
Overall, they did a pretty good job. The Howling Wolf guy was pretty amazing.
I rate that movie. I love it because obviously there's not a lot of good blues movies out there, and
pretty good job.
Yeah, and I think the guy that acts as Little Walter does a pretty good job too.
Crashed his car, didn't he, into the storefront? Yeah. Showed the four main characters were five. It showed Muddy Waters being very subservient to the record label, Howling Wolf being his own man, having his own money, and putting money in the bank, and it showed Little Walter just being really just young and reckless. And just kind of showed it in a brief way, just a little. It kind of showed us their personalities and how they handled their fame. Because if you think about it, 10 years prior, they would have been picking cotton, dreaming of the big city, and Chicago, the money, the lights, the women, the suits, the attention. It would have been hard for some of them to handle.
What did you think about the part in there where the Stones walk in to record those songs and they bump into Muddy?
Yeah, well, that's that famous story about no one knows really if it's true or not about Muddy not selling records at the time, so he's painting the ceiling white. And Keith said something about, here's the king of the blues, paint the goddamn ceiling. What's going on? And then Marshall Chess said, I think Marshall Chess was trying to cover his father's tale by saying, Muddy wasn't painting no ceiling. He was a recording artist. But one thing I'd also like to mention when we talk about harmonica, how important it was to the blues sound, and how it was just, a great instrument because you could put in your pocket. And there was obviously, besides Little Walter, you had your Shaky Hortons, you had your Junior Wells, the list goes on. But a lot of that sound they were capturing was the sound of a train. And in the South, the train meant freedom because they were obviously working in the fields 7 days a week. And they had these dreams of jumping on a train, the train taking them to the city to be liberated.
Heading north to Chicago.
Yes. And the country air turned into electric air because everything in Chicago was wired.
Yeah, I love that film because, that part there where Muddy's arrives in the city and he's got his acoustic guitar and he's, trying to hustle a few bucks and no one pays any attention to him, and then the girl throws down a power chord and he hooks up his guitar and discovers
it was it was at that particular time. It was very primal music. It was very, and people don't realise this, that Chuck Berry was signed to Chess and Bo Diddley, and they both had their own different sounds. So young kids like the Stones and to a lesser degree the Kinks and the Yardbirds and all them, not only were they listening to these Chess records, blues records, but they had the rock and the and I'd call Bo Diddley R&B, rhythm and blues, which is another take on the blues, a bit more faster and a bit more rocky. So just everything was coming at everybody all at once. The blues guys in Chicago with the big city, the attention, and all the young, skinny, pimply little kids in Britain, and all, you know that they would have had listening parties and swapping 45s and check this out, man. Check this song out, man. Who's this?
Yeah.
Who's that?
The second song I've picked is the Howlin' Wolf song, "Commit a Crime." I just love that song, and when the Stones did it, and you can hear some good guitar work from Ronnie on that. It's pretty good, and when I hear that song, in my mind, I see Brian Jones and Mick Jagger being interviewed for that Shindig program, and Brian telling them to shut up, and let's get this cat Howlin' Wolf on.
That's right. And Howlin' Wolf did that great song called How Many More Years. I would talk about Brian, which is a good point. We're talking about harmonica, and you mentioned Mick being a great harmonica, and he is. But credit to Brian and credit to his vision. He said, if we're going to be an authentic blues band, we've got to play the harp. And Brian picked up the harp first, and he had it down pat. And we read all the Stones books. I think within a day or two, he had it all figured out. Because as you know, that if we're playing in the key of E as guitar players, the harmonica's in step down is an A, isn't he?
That's correct.
So Brian, obviously he didn't have that little Walter sound, and it's a bit of a shame they didn't hook it up to a microphone. But Brian was still a pretty good harp player. In order for the Stones to be a bona fide blues band, if we're going to be like these Chicago guys, we've got to add the harp. And
you've hit the nail on the head. What Brian did is he worked out cross harp by himself. There wasn't any YouTube around. He worked out that, and there's famous clips where he's actually playing harp in two keys. So
not
outstanding for a young guy to work that out. Yep. But again, you said for them to be an authentic blues band, he said, one of us has to play the harp. So naturally, he was the gifted musician, so he could just pick it up like that. But he also worked out how to use, as we touched on last week, how to use the slide.
Yes.
Before anybody, I don't think anyone in England was playing the slide.
Well, at the Marquee, when Mick and Keith were hanging out trying to get amongst it, Brian Jones was already established as known as Elmo Lewis.
Yeah,
and he would play to the audience with the back against the audience because he didn't want no one stealing his licks because he'd worked hard for those licks. And apparently, all the people were just blown away that some young kid had this Chicago slide sound down pretty good. And it gave everybody the courage to, A, play the guitar, and B, try the slide. I mean, he was doing that before George Harrison. He would have been doing that before Jeremy Spencer. He would have been doing that before a lot of people. And when they met Brian, because they heard all the blues stories about being a blues man and the woman and the kids and the fame. Brian was, 19, had 3 kids, and they couldn't believe, it was like, this guy's the real deal. We're still staying home with Mum.
Sure. Hey, Carl, because we had some technical issues, and as much as I would love to continue this conversation with you, there's something I'd like to talk on air about, and obviously you don't have to answer it, but maybe you can give it some thought. A couple of people have contacted me through Messenger asking if we could go twice a week. So I said, well, look, sorry to R3 Lockie Nut. I did send a notification out, but we had some technical issues. So sorry, my friend, and we haven't been on air that long because of that. So sorry about that. Just filling in on the chat, Carl. And I know that you're busy, but maybe
seriously.
Maybe during the week, maybe on a Wednesday for an hour or something, if you can fit. How does that fit in with you?
Yeah, it's fine. Twice a week's good.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why it's good, because I got some good feedback from a few guys who watched the first episode. So I want to give a shout out to Ben Coombs from Canucks with Guitars, a Canadian who wants to jump on board with us too. He's a start too, Carl.
Awesome.
So he's asked to jump on, but he's busy at the moment, and obviously we've got the time difference between New Zealand and North America.
Yep.
And JC Smith is saying he's got no notification, and R2, R3 again. Yeah, sorry guys, we had some technical issues, so we have sorted that out. So just bear with us as we get the show up and running. I'm personally intrigued, and I want to draw a lot of information out of Carl, because he's a blues nut. There's a lot in that head of his, and there's a lot in his heart that needs to come out. So this is the perfect forum for it. We've spoken as friends for a few years about our love and passion for music. But one thing that I've particularly enjoyed about YouTube is that in our community of musicians and music fans, other people around the world are interested too. And if it's 3 or 4 people who participate in our show and want to offer some opinions or jump into the chat and talk about the Stones, British blues, and what inspired the British blues scene, i.e. Chicago blues, the invitation's always open.
Perfect. Yeah. It's twice a week is fine, because I tell you what, if we did this twice a week for 3 years, we'd still be talking about something, because it's just so in depth.
I mean, well, yeah. I was watching a show last night because I don't have a social life. Another show, and they were talking about on this show a band's record covers, and they were marking the record covers. Yep. So I think what you and I need to do too, if we're going to be talking about albums, we should mark the album covers from a 9 to 10. Sorry, because most of them are 9s or 10s in my opinion. From a 1 to 10. Now, Blue and Lonesome is an interesting album cover. When it came out, I didn't like it. The Stones logo, blue. I didn't like it. But it's growing on me, because I suppose they couldn't have 70-year-old guys in leather jackets on the cover.
Well, it's I guess it's quite it's the branding of the tongue. It's Blue and Lonesome. It's quite it's catchy, and I guess they're aiming for the modern appeal. I'm not sure. I mean, that whole black and white, the band by railway tracks or in an old barn house, I guess that kind of looks pretty tired now, isn't it?
Well, here's a comment. Here's a comment that JC Smith, our friend, has made. Okay, spit Carl's head open and let that knowledge spill out.
Yeah. Oh, hey,
and R2R3 saying, bring on the blues, man. I was jamming blues all day on his new Stratocaster. Yeah, that's a mean, beautiful Stratocaster. Yeah, I love that Stratocaster.
Yeah. No, well, I'm just glad that they've went full circle and did that album, because it just shows you that, you know, apart from all the rocks, you know, the tours and the money and the TV and the their personal life and their you know, the ups and downs, they've gone back to where they started, which is the blues. One more thing I wanted to mention. I mean, you mentioned a couple of songs. I'd like to. My last song. I don't know much about this song, but I want to talk about the man, Jimmy Reed.
Wow.
Jimmy Reed was really instrumental in creating that Stones sound, because what Jimmy Reed did, him and Eddie Taylor is a little bit like Danny Kirwan, the unsung hero. They're interweaving. That less is more approach. Jimmy Reed, they played so slow that it was actually hard to play, and Brian and Keith really worked at it and actually made Charlie and Bill better players, because it wasn't the notes between the notes, it was the space between the notes that made the sound. And if you read up about some of those early records, the people, some of the reviewers were like, that's amazing. They could do Jimmy Reed well because they played it really slow. And I mean, the Spider and the Fly, that sort of thing. It's not easy to do, to play like that. So Jimmy Reed was.
What amazes me about that too, Carl, is like an E, an A,
yeah,
and a B, and for how many songs?
Well, Jimmy Reed, he was so good. He could make that all very interesting. I mean, that first album, when you hear "Honest I Do," once again, stuff is not. That's their version, Little by Little, is just a direct ripoff of Shame, Shame, Shame. Which is just, yeah, Jimmy Reed was a big part of that Stones sound. The harp, the twin guitar playing, and I guess the operative word would be the tempo. Jimmy Reed taught the Stones about a certain tempo, which a lot of other bands couldn't do, because that British beat bop sound was actually quite fast. And looking back, a lot of it sounds really poppy and stupid, where the Stones actually were quite authentic because they could play that slow blues.
Yeah.
Yardbirds couldn't do it. They couldn't.
I'm just going to show R2R3 he's mentioned Stevie Ray Vaughan in the chat, that he's been playing on his Strat.
Yep.
So I'm going to show him. This is a custom vibe. It's a Squire, Chinese made. But he's asked if I can show some. So I've relicked that myself. And yeah. But I have to say, R2, R3, that this is probably one of the best Stratocasters I've ever played. And it comes close, very close to my American-made Strats. It's beautiful. Can't beat a Strat. Sorry, Carl.
That's all right.
We have to talk about guitars too. Clearly.
Why not?
That's beautiful, man. Yeah, thank you. One thing that disappoints me about Blue and Lonesome is that they didn't make a DVD of
studio or
of them recording that album. It seems bizarre that they wouldn't have or didn't do that.
Well, yeah, good point. Because they've seemed to capture them other times. Yeah, yeah. Because that bigger was it a bigger bang? What was
Bigger
it?
bang. Yep.
That was touching on a lot of blues on that too. But that was obviously Stone's songs.
Yeah, well, they went back to that a core sound, didn't they? Of just their instruments. There was no overproduction.
Yeah. So Blue and Lonesome was a straight blues cover album, but wow. Yeah. Plug my phone in. But yeah, and getting back to Commit a Crime, once again, those songs are not easy to play because it's the same chord progression and 2 chords that whole song, but you got to hold on and make that sound interesting. Yeah, those guys are. I mean, everything you want to hear about the Stones is in that first album. So first album and then Blue and Lonesome. It's the full circle.
And all the meat and good sauces in between.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, because they did a really, really, really good job of covering some of those good blues acts. Muddy Waters actually said when they were in Chess Studios, and can you imagine that being 21 years old? First of all, being a good band, but actually playing in America, and then Chess organizes some studio time in the studio, the house of your heroes. What an amazing experience! And that's the album 12.5 is recorded all in Chess Studios. And they finally had it was all Fender amps, but cut a long story short, Muddy Waters said the same thing. He said those guys can play. So they would send some shivers up some spines of some of those old blues guys.
And, well, one of my favourite DVDs is that DVD that they did, Jeepers. Was it in the 1980s?
Checkerboard Lounge.
Yeah.
1981. Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting because that was I guess they had a few days off in between shows in the 1981 tour, and for them to be playing in the house of their heroes once again, and they all looked like they're having a pretty good time. And was it Manish Boy and Mick was in the red jumpsuit, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And they had another guy, interesting guitar player, lefty something, yeah, left-handed guitar player. But
not lefty Brazil.
I was going to say that's the country western guy. Yeah, this guy was lefty or lefty dizzy or something. But no. What? Can you imagine being in that small club? Incredible. Stones and the Muddy Waters. Yeah, because sometimes that's the best sound. I mean, we know that we love these big rock shows, but to see these guys in a club of no more than 100 people seated, wow, probably less.
Hey, so we're going to continue this chat on Wednesday.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'll just give a shout out to the guys in the chat, and sorry guys, we had some technical issues, so the show didn't go nowhere near as long as Carl and I had hoped. So R2, R3, JC Smith, JJ's House of Jams. Appreciate you guys jumping in on board. The American, how's it going? Quentin James, cheers guys for joining us, and we'll send out some notifications for when Carl and I go live in 3 days' time.
Yeah, and so obviously rounding off, did you want to continue talking about Blue and Lonesome, or Wednesday we'll just cross that bridge when it comes?
Oh, I think we'll wing it, won't we?
Yep, awesome.
Don't go away.